What happens when someone tries to humiliate a waitress but accidentally exposes a federal investigation, an international art crime network, and their own lifelong blind spot? Stay with me, because this gala isn't a party, it's a pressure test, and one torn dress is about to trigger a system-wide failure for the people who thought they owned the room. How dare a waitress wear designer clothing? I'll teach you to know your place. Sabrina Caldwell's voice cut through the Metropolitan Grand Ballroom like a blade through silk. Her red sequined gown flashed under crystal chandeliers as she held a strip of torn white fabric high in the air, like a trophy. And 300 guests, New York's most polished donors, collectors, executives, and society gatekeepers, went still as if the power had dropped. In the center of that frozen circle stood Aaliyah Monroe, apron still tied at her waist, her white dress ripped from shoulder to hip, the sound of tearing fabric echoing louder than the string quartet had been 5 minutes earlier. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry under the harsh ballroom lights. Her face held a calm, so controlled it felt almost frightening, the kind of calm you see in people who've learned to operate under real pressure. She lowered her eyes, knelt, and picked up a small metal card that had slipped from her pocket and clattered across the marble floor. The card caught the light as it spun once, then settled. Elegant engraving. Minimalist, official, the kind of object most of the room wouldn't recognize, but the handful who did felt their stomachs tighten. 3 steps away, Nathan Caldwell watched his wife with a dawning horror that had nothing to do with social embarrassment and everything to do with consequences he could suddenly see coming like a train on a straight track. 10 minutes earlier, the ballroom had been humming with that specific frequency of old money and new money trying to sound the same. The annual Caldwell Foundation Charity Gala was Manhattan's launch. Art collectors in tailored suits, hedge fund managers doing human calculus mid-conversation, social climbers trading micro-smiles like business cards. Aaliyah had worked dozens of events like this, moving through the room invisible among the powerful, carrying champagne flutes worth more than her hourly wage, hearing generosity dressed up in photo ops and tax write-offs. She'd worn her grandmother's white dress under her server's apron tonight because it was the only thing she had that felt like her, and because her grandmother had once told her, quietly, "Some rooms try to shrink you. Wear something that remembers your size." The dress wasn't flashy, clean lines, old craftsmanship, a kind of elegant restraint that had been rare even when it was made. As she moved between tables, she noticed something odd. Instead of the usual dismissal, conversations paused when she passed. Not because they were looking down at he, but because they were looking at her, curiosity, not contempt. She caught her reflection in a mirrored wall and saw a woman who belonged here even if the uniform said otherwise. Then came the voice behind her. "Excuse me, Miss Sabrina." Caldwell approached like she'd practiced predation all her life. Billionaire's wife, lifelong Manhattan royalty, red gown flowing like fire, diamonds calibrated to steal attention at every angle. She studied Aaliyah's dress with narrowed eyes. "That's quite an interesting piece you're wearing," she said, tone sweet enough to be venomous. "Very ambitious for someone in your position. Where exactly did you get such expensive taste?" The implication was as loud as the words were polite. "You couldn't own this honestly." Aaliyah turned fully professional composure, locked in. "Mrs. Caldwell, how may I help you?" The people nearest them felt the shift and edged closer, drawn in by the promise of spectacle. Sabrina leaned in stage, whispering in a way that carried perfectly. "Your grandmother's, you say?" She smiled sharply. "I recognize this design. Valentina, 1968, extremely rare. Extremely valuable. Strange how it ended up in your family." Each syllable was a coded accusation. Aaliyah had heard versions of this her whole life in high-end stores and museums. Assumptions delivered like facts to remind her she was a guest in spaces built to exclude her. She kept her voice level. "It was my grandmother's. That was all, no defense. No explanation, because some people don't ask questions to learn. They ask to wound across the room." Nathan Caldwell, who had been deep in a conversation about donor match ratios and zoning approvals, looked over and felt a jolt of premonition. He'd seen Sabrina be dismissive and sharp before, but the energy in her body now meant she was about to cross a line. He started walking toward them without knowing why, just feeling the way you feel when your dashboard lights up and you don't yet know which subsystem is failing. Sabrina's voice rose to performance volume. The only misunderstanding is thinking you can parade around here in stolen goods without consequence. Before anyone could stop her, she grabbed the dress at Aaliyah's shoulder. One brutal yank. The rip cut through the ballroom. Gasps rose in waves. Aaliyah stood in the open, exposed to hundreds of eyes, Sabrina holding the torn fabric overhead like evidence in a trial she'd already decided she could win. Now everyone can see who you really are. Sabrina declared, "Theft is theft. No matter how nicely you dress it up, Aaliyah's stillness unnerved people more than crying would have." She gathered the torn fabric with precision, and that was when the metal card fell. The chime of metal on stone drew every eye downward. Aaliyah picked it up. Fewer than 200 people on the planet held that credential. It wasn't a membership badge. It was a professional identity, vetted and tracked. He heard himself say quietly, "I believe this is yours." Aaliyah accepted it, her fingers brushing his in a way that made something he couldn't name. Like the floor had shifted and he was suddenly standing in a different story. "Thank you," she said simply. No anger, no tremor. Sabrina's triumph faltered for half a heartbeat, replaced by the unmistakable sensation that she had just awakened a force she didn't understand. And then Aaliyah did something even stranger. She went right back to work. Dress tore apron still on head up, moving through the room as if humiliation were merely an annoying variable, not a collapse. Servers whispered. Guests murmured. The calm didn't play like submission. It played like control. People started watching her the way engineers watch an unexpected system response, trying to infer what's really driving it. When an elderly philanthropist began choking on salmon, Aaliyah appeared instantly, hands moving with practiced precision. Heimlich clean execution, no panic. The man coughed, gasped, recovered. "That was expert," he said. "Are you medical first aid training?" Aaliyah replied. But Nathan caught the deflection in her tone and the way she checked the man's pulse and airway with deeper competence than basic training teaches. A little later, art collector Elena Vasquez mentioned a disputed Rothko. Aaliyah, while clearing flutes, said casually, "Your 1947 provenance should include Marlboro gallery stamps. Without them, authentication gets complicated." Vasquez froze. "You know early Rothko documentation?" Aaliyah nodded lightly. "I've encountered similar pieces and moved on before follow-up questions could land." Nathan's internal model of server was breaking down fast. He saw her speaking fluent Italian to a diplomat's wife about Renaissance underpainting techniques. He saw her field a phone call in rapid French, quiet but authoritative. "Yes, documentation is complete. Berlin can wait. I need the chain of custody airtight." "Interesting staff you've got," Hart murmured. "She's been photographing high-value pieces all night, not tourist shots. Documentation measurement angles. Provenance marks. Is sure nicht stop what we forcen." Titan. Documentation of what Hart smiled thinly. "Either you hired the most overqualified caterer in New York, or something real is going on in your ballroom." He walked away, leaving Nathan staring at Aaliyah's paths through the crowd. Now he noticed her movements weren't random. She placed herself near certain pieces, near certain conversations, surfaced at the edges of people who talked about private sales and off-record acquisitions. Sabrina sidled up beside him, irritated. Why is she still here? Security should have tossed her. Nathan's voice came out colder than he intended, because she hasn't done anything wrong. "And from what I'm seeing, she's more qualified than half the people in this room," Sabrina scoffed. "Brittle. Qualified to steal and pretend. People like that are always looking for angles." Nathan looked at his wife and, for the first time in years, saw fear underneath her rage. Fear that her assumptions were collapsing. The last guests were drifting toward coats and goodbyes when disaster struck. Harrison Webb, renowned collector, too much wine, too much confidence, stumbled backward, and his glass arced through the air. Burgundy splashed across Nathan's Monet water lilies like blood on snow. The room convulsed in panic. People shouted for napkins, for water, for anything, most of them about to make it worse with good intentions and no knowledge. Then Aaliyah's voice cut through, quiet and commanding, "Nobody touch it." She knelt beside the painting without waiting for permission. "Wine has tannins and sulfites. If we don't act now, it bonds to the canvas." Her tone had no drama, only precision. "I need distilled water. cotton swabs, and a soft, natural bristle brush. Not tap water, minerals will deposit and damage the surface. The specificity silenced the amateurs instantly. She examined the spill under the light like a surgeon reading tissue. We have maybe 10 minutes before it penetrates lower layers, she said. A server rushed in with materials. Aaliyah tested the swab, checked the brush for synthetics, and began working from the perimeter inward. Outside to center, she explained calmly. Reverse spreads contamination. Her hands moved in tiny, controlled motions, removing wine without disturbing paint. The crowd watched, breath held. This wasn't improvisation. This was trained expertise. Margaret Thornton, museum board president, whispered, "She's doing conservation-level work." Webb stared, shaken. "Where did you learn to do that?" Aaliyah didn't look up. "Conservation labs, Paris, London, New York." She finished the last section and leaned back. The Monet was clean, stable, intact. "Have a conservator assess in 48 hours, she said. "No visible underlayer damage, but verify." Webb exhaled like someone pulled from water. "You just saved a $28 million painting," he said. "Please call me. The Met is always looking for talent like yours." Aaliyah accepted his card with the same composure she'd shown all night. "Art deserves to be preserved," she said. Regardless of who's holding the brush, Nathan stood there feeling the entire evening rewire itself in his head. Sabrina hissed at his shoulder. "She's putting on a show to gain sympathy." Nathan didn't even glance at her. "Sympathy doesn't teach you Louvre protocols," he said, voice low. The gala ended. Staff cleaned up. Nathan found Aaliyah in the kitchen alone, methodically loading trays like someone who always closes out a process before moving on. "You can go," he said. Everyone else left. Aaliyah looked up. "I finished what I started beat, and I needed a moment to think." Nathan tried to find words that didn't sound hollow. "About earlier, my wife Aaliyah cut in gently. Factual. Your wife wasn't threatened by me. She was threatened by what I represent, that her assumptions might be wrong." She turned fully to him. "The question is whether you're ready to examine yours." He swallowed. "Who are you really?" Aaliyah took out the metal credential. In the kitchen light, it was unmistakable. "I'm Dr. Aaliyah Monroe, advanced degrees in art history and forensic authentication. For 5 years, I've worked with international law enforcement tracking stolen and forged art through high-end auctions." Nathan's mind raced photographs, phone calls, her strategic paths, Hart's comment. "You're investigating fraud, here, tonight. Money laundering through art," she said. "Dirty money goes in via inflated purchases. Clean money comes out through private resale and manipulated auctions. We've been tracking a network involving galleries, auction houses, and collectors." Her eyes held steady on him. "Tonight was for observation and final evidence." Nathan's voice dropped. "And someone here is involved." "I don't think," she said flatly. "I document." She showed him her phone. Professional shots of provenance marks, signature stamps, ownership trails, communications records. Then she delivered the sentence that made his blood cold. "Your wife physically assaulted a federal investigator in front of 300 witnesses." Nathan sank into a chair. "So what happens now?" "Now you choose," Aaliyah said. "Protect someone who put you in legal jeopardy, or help us understand how deep this is." By morning, the video of Sabrina tearing the dress was everywhere. CNN, The Times, millions of views. The public read it as what it was, privileged cruelty and coded racism caught in high definition. The art world recognized Aaliyah instantly and rallied. Donors pulled out. Awards were revoked. Partnerships paused. Nathan's lawyers called with the nightmare expansion, assault charges plus financial scrutiny of Sabrina's purchases. 3 days later, federal agents arrived at dawn. Sabrina was arrested on money laundering conspiracy, fraud facilitation, tax evasion, and assault on a federal officer. She refused cooperation. Nathan cooperated fully, turning over records that mapped the network. He avoided prison, but lost most of his fortune through forfeiture and penalties, as laundered assets. The case triggered international indictments and reforms. Aaliyah testified before Congress about the art market's vulnerability to laundering, and bipartisan legislation followed stronger provenance requirements, federal tracking databases, KYC-style procedures for galleries and auction houses. The Caldwell Gala was replaced the next year by an art crime prevention conference. 6 months after sentencing, in the same ballroom, under the same chandeliers, Dr. Aaliyah Monroe stood at the podium in a flawless white dress. Not the torn evidence dress, but one chosen on her terms, and addressed 300 people who now listened with the respect they should have shown from the start. When criminals exploit art markets, she said, voice steady, they steal money and cultural heritage at the same time. Transparency is the only antidote. Nathan sat in the front row, no longer a man convinced hierarchy equals truth, but someone living with the cost of not seeing people clearly. In the end, the most expensive thing Sabrina destroyed wasn't a dress. It was the illusion that power makes you right. And the most valuable thing Aaliyah carried out of that ballroom wasn't a credential or a recovered Monet. It was the proof that dignity under pressure can expose rot in any system no matter how polished the surface looks.